Bonjour à tous and welcome to my channel Betty à la mode. In today's video I'll be showing you how I made this white dress. The materials I used were my main fabric, my lining fabric, invisible zipper, matching thread, torso block, pattern paper, my marker, and rulers. To get started, I traced my front torso pattern onto two pieces of pattern paper since I did not have a pattern paper that was wide enough for me to be able to trace and have the whole front layout. And then I used tape to tape the pieces together at the back. And as you can see, my pattern paper is not transparent enough for me to transfer my dots and bust points on. So what I did was use a pin and push through the paper layers, and that left a mark on the paper. And so I was able to use my ruler and connect all the dots and just have my lines that I needed to transfer over onto the pattern paper. For the strapless side, I transferred my strapless contour line, and for the side that had the strap, I transferred my neckline contour line. For the back, I did the same thing, traced my back torso pattern with the contour lines as well. To start on the front pattern, 1/2 inch from the shoulder point, I marked 2.5 inch for my shoulder strap, and I marked the middle of that 2.5 inch. That's why I have the 3 dots. And on the neckline, I marked 3 inches down from the center front. At the side seams, I marked 1/2 inch underneath both armholes. From the waist towards the hip line, I marked a 6-inch point. I did that for the center front and at the side as well. For the back, I did the same thing as well. 1/2 inch from the shoulder point, I marked my shoulder strap point measurement, which was 2.5 inch, and I marked the middle of that measurement. And I did the same thing at the side seams, where I marked 1/2 inch down from the armhole, and from the waist down towards the hip, I marked 6 inches on the center and on the side. Then I used my markings to trace all my lines. At the armhole, I traced my neckline, and at the hip point, the drop waist point, I did square across a few inches from the center, and then I used my curve ruler. The bottom of the dress is symmetrical, so I simply traced my line on one side and folded the paper and cut through both sides, and I then cut off all the pieces I won't be needing. Next, I connected a line from the middle of my shoulder strap to the bust point, and I also connected a line from my side dot to the bust point as well. And from there, I cut my side pieces off. I love connecting notches, so I marked all the notch point on my pattern pieces. Now it's time to close my side dots. Once they're closed, then I smooth out my bust point. What I'm doing here is making sure the circle points meet up from both sides of the pattern pieces. From the bust point to the circle points, they meet up. And at the top, whatever matches I keep, and any excess I remove. For the neckline, I wanted a curvy, smooth line, and it took some trial and error for me to get the result that I desired. Most of the times, asymmetrical necklines are not curvy. They don't have to be curvy. In fact, that causes gaping if it's too curved. And I did face that issue at the back. Not that it's visible, but depending on the angles at which I moved, I could see some gaping. So at the back, I did the same thing. I connected my dots, my marking points. I did add a dot at the back that is the same measurement of the dot that's on the contour line, touching the curve line. For my back, in order for me to create the side piece, I connected a line from the middle point of the shoulder strap to the legs of the dot, the original dot, not the contour, but to the legs of the original dot on that side. And so I did that line going to both of the legs of the dot. My main fabric that I'm using is this beautiful white fabric. The camera does not do it justice, unfortunately. Even the finished project does not show the beauty of the fabric. My fabric came from my friend who sent it to me from New York. He has sent me boxes and boxes and boxes of fabrics. I have an abundance of fabrics, so I am grateful for amazing people. I'm grateful for abundance. My lining fabric, I used 2 pillowcases which came from the boxes as well, and they were lightweight, they were perfect for the job. So yeah, that's how that went. So I started out cutting the lining pieces first, mainly because I was nervous I was not going to have enough and I needed to figure out what I would do if it didn't work out. But thankfully everything worked out. Once I had the bottom pieces, the linings, I then measured 3 times that measurement for each tier. So I'm using a 3-to-1 ruffle, 3-to-1 ratio. And then the length of the ruffle pieces are 3 inches longer than the linings. When I started sewing, I sewed the front pieces all together for the main fabric. The back pieces I sewed all together, and then I connected the front and back at the side seam. And my mistake was also connecting the shoulders, and so I had to undo that. And then I sewed the lining pieces, the front and then the back, and connected those at the side as well. Then I connected the lining to the front, the right sides together, connected it at the neckline and out at the armhole. Then once I was done with that, that's when I connected the shoulder pieces together. For my ruffle pieces to create the gather, I sewed 2 straight line of basting stitches. On each of the pieces I was going to gather, and that's how I created my gather. I did mark notches, the middle notch point on all of my pieces, and I connected the middle of the ruffle piece to the middle of the lining, and then I did each side separate for ruffling because it was a large piece of fabric, so that helped make it easier. Alright, so for my bottom pieces, how I put everything together was that I created my ruffles, set everything aside, and then I took the lining pieces of the first tier, connected the front and back together at the right side, which is going to be the side that's connected to the sleeveless part, not the strapless part, but the sleeveless side. So I connected front and back together on that right side, and I did the same thing for the ruffle piece for the first tier as well. I connected front and back together, so the side seam, and left the other side open, did nothing to it. And then I connected the lining to the ruffle, right side of the lining facing the wrong side of the ruffle. I base stitched them together and set that aside. And for the bottom tiers, I sewed both sides together, right and left sides, for the lining piece, and the ruffles I did the same thing, and then I attached the lining to the ruffle, base stitched them together, wrong side of the ruffles facing the right side of the lining. What I did when I was connecting my lining to the ruffle for the top tier, I left half an inch on each side, not stitch, and then I base stitched all around and left half an inch on the other end as well. And that's for when I'm adding the zipper. To get started with connecting the bottom to the top, I am only connecting my first top tier to the main fabric on the top, not to the lining. I will be connecting that much later on after I add the zipper. For now, I will only be connecting my first tier to the main part of the fabric of the top. I am going to stitch 2 inches at the bottom of that other side seam that I did not stitch together, front and back. I am going to stitch only 2 inches of it on the ruffle and the lining. That's how I'm going to attach the bottom piece to the top tier. Alright, so now it's time for me to connect the bottom tier to the top tier. And what I did was just connecting the bottom tier to the lining, only the lining, not the ruffle part of the first tier. For my zipper, I added that after I added my bottom pieces to the dress. I then added my zipper. My zipper extended from the armhole all the way to 1.5 inch of the top tier, all the way to 1.5 inch into the top tier. So that's how much of it went into my zipper. After I connected my lining to the dress, my zipper was added, my lining connected. Then I hemmed the dress all around. I hemmed the ruffle pieces and then hemmed the bottom tier lining as well. And my dress was pretty much done.